Hey there explorers, it's me again, Ryan James Cropper, and a couple of days ago I asked you what you would like to see more of on my YouTube channel. I got a decent amount of replies, and this one in particular piqued my interest. It's from a user named Wing Sparrow. I want you to tell us about exorcisms, and your view on how it works in your perspective, and why the name of Jesus makes entities scared and weak. Overall, I would like you to touch base on the higher powers in the universe and how it works, in brackets, God. Sorry if it sounds lame. And so in this video, I would like to talk about my perspective and my experience with exorcisms on top of why saying Jesus' name scares away entities. And it's not just Jesus' name. It's also the names of any ascended master out there that has reached a specific level within their spiritual development. Right? More on that later, but first, let's talk about my exorcism experience. As you all know, I'm big into astral projection. Astral projection is the ability to leave your body at will and experience the spirit world. When you cross over into this plane of existence, you can meet a lot of different things. Positive as well as negative things. However, when it comes to this exorcism story, I guess I can leave it up to you as to whether or not you think this particular individual is negative. You see, I'm laying on my bed, and it's the morning. It's one of the easiest times that I can leave my body. And as I open my eyes, I notice that the bed seems to be sinking in, as if someone was standing on my bed. This didn't concern me so much because it felt as if, although this thing was apparently invisible, it didn't feel like it had any form of malice, right? It didn't feel like it was there to scare me. It actually felt quite shy. Now, unfortunately for it, I had a 5x4 mirror on my wall, okay? Now, mirrors in the astral plane will reveal anything in the astral plane that's trying to be invisible, that's trying not to be seen. I have a couple of creepy stories about that too, but I'll talk about that later on my YouTube channel. As I look over to the right, at the mirror, I can see this girl. I look out in front of me. I kind of skew my eyes a little bit, and I notice some shimmering effect going on in front of me. I say to her, "You're safe here. There's no need to worry. Please reveal yourself." I had to say this a few times because she really was hesitant in the beginning. But after a while, this shimmery form decided to materialize. Not entirely. All I could see was somewhat of a spectre wearing sandals with socks, as well as some black hair. I get up out of bed and I sit down with her. As I'm looking at her, as I'm getting a feel for how she's feeling, I notice that she feels confused and that she feels terrified. I tell her to lay on my bed, and I start to counsel her, in a sense. I start to make her okay with the idea that she has passed on. I'm still on the fence as to whether or not she could flip out on me. She seemed okay in the beginning. However, spirits in the astral plane tend to be quite bipolar, especially if they've been dead for a long period of time. And I can't see her face fully yet. But she's cooperating at the moment, and so as she's laying there, I'm making her comfortable with the idea that she's passed on. She starts to take on a form. Her clothes completely change. She's no longer wearing sandals, she's actually wearing dolly shoes. And what looks to be a Japanese kimono. It's gold, it's white, has bits of blue in there. And as I look up at her face, that's now taking form, she's wearing a ceramic mask. Okay? I can clearly see the holes in her eyes beneath the ceramic mask. Now, as I'm talking to her, and she's feeling better, the mask starts to become her actual face. It starts to sink down, touching her skin, and the actual edge of the mask starts to merge with her flesh. I begin to start to see an expression on her face, a slight smile. But then at one point, I kind of questioned some of the things that I said to her. Well, there's one thing in particular about her being happy in the afterlife. Will she be happy? I don't know the entirety of her story. I don't know how much she has to carry over to the next phase in her afterlife, but it was a quick thought and it was fleeting at best, because as soon as I started doubting, even so slightly, her eyes darted straight at me, the mask started to come up again, and the feeling of malice exuded off of her body. I found my bearings. She smiled again, and then her face became the mask once again. She started to fade, she became transparent, light even, and then she just disappeared. This started happening during a phase in my life when I was astral projecting the most. I was around 17 years of age, and it's going to sound kind of wacky, but I'm going to call them angels. You can look at them as spirit guides, as well as ETs, started to come through my walls on a regular basis, ushering to me the dead, the deceased, those who have just passed on. And it was my job, not by choice, to, I guess, debrief them on what had just happened to them. At one point, there was this guy cradling down, holding very so tightly to my sink, murmuring words. Took a while to approach him and make him aware of what just happened, but when I did, he looked up, and the window area of my bedroom opened up, seemingly appearing as a completely different place. He, again, went invisible, almost as if he's matching that location, and just faded off. He disappeared, and so did that location that came in ever so briefly in my room. There was another time when a guy in an adult-size diaper sat down at the foot of my bed. I woke up looking down at his back. He had a knife and a fork in his hand. I got up, looked at him. I just knew he died because of health complications, to say the least. He was quite overweight, very pale. He had balding on top of his head. He looked completely out of it. He actually looked more like a cadaver because his eyes had slightly frosted over. This happened for months, and, you know, there were some times where I genuinely enjoyed it, but then there were times when I just wanted to get some sleep at school in the morning, and some of the people that were coming through into my room weren't so cooperative. There was this one couple that had died in a car accident. They were arguing in my room, and I was like, oh, what is that noise? I got up, and she was coming at me saying he did this, and he was coming at me saying she did that. And I'm like, look, it could partly be both of your faults, right? They didn't want to hear that. And so I just got away. I went through my mirror to another location, came out of the side of a factory, backed up against the woods. As I start to go off into the woods, I hear the same nagging and the complaints that I heard in my bedroom. These two individuals followed me through the mirror. I walk up the bank of the forest, and I come upon a field full of children. They're just looking at me. It's creepy, I'm gonna be honest. But I decided that, I'm just gonna go in an opposite direction, and I walked the opposite way. So exorcisms in the astral plane, when it comes to my perspective, it's just counseling, really. There are other forms of doing it, and those require psychedelics so that you can be in a specific state of mind. It's much more esoteric when you're like that. But on the topic of psychedelics, on the topic of being in an altered state of mind, let's go into Jesus and let's talk about as to why saying his name repels negative entities. Okay? Jesus, as well as a handful of ascended masters, are privy to a certain type of information in regard to the source of creation. Okay? This little detail terrifies negative beings. It's unbearable for them to hear about, as well as to confront. And so any ascended master who has reached a specific state or a specific level within their spiritual journey, they've become aware of this fact. And so it's like having a secret, right? And you're in a room with a bunch of people, and that individual over there who's looking at you saying, don't say it, don't say the secret. And before you have a chance to say it out loud, they get so uncomfortable, they just get up and leave. It's the same thing here. So what is the secret? Well, and I gotta be careful as to how I word this because I was told not to on camera. I don't want to get a slap on the wrist. When God came into being, it became aware of itself. That was God coming into being. That was source awareness becoming aware of itself. It's kind of like it's waking up. As soon as it woke up, I was like, oh, here I am. Now, it didn't have a body. It was non-corporeal, but it had a sense of self. After a while of stewing on its existence, it hit a roadblock. It got extremely uncomfortable with the idea of being alone, of being the only one like itself. This caused a state of conflict within itself, which then led to a fracture of itself into two parts. One side was okay with being the only thing in existence and experiencing more of itself. The other side, not so much. The other side still very much rebelled against this idea, against this fact. The issue is that when it rebelled, without it knowing, it ended up splintering out into space and therefore time, because with space comes the perception of time, and creating, materializing different planes of existences where this form of rebellion would be made manifest through wars, through arguments in relationship, through hatred of oneself and how a person may not like how they look, to how they may not like their environment. Basically, any thought stemming from a sense of discomfort and thereby rebellion. It came from what you can call the original sin, and everything in our history can be connected to this original happening. Now, on the other hand, you have the other side of the coin, the other face of God, that's okay with itself. This is shown by people in life, enjoying themselves, enjoying the pleasures of life, right? Matter of fact, depending on what aspect of creation you're born from will determine how you generally show up in life. If you're often quite rebellious, if you're often quite angry, if you're often, how can I put it, in a state of constant denial, then you may very well be an offshoot, your soul, of this particular aspect of source creation. Now that goes to say that if you love life, if you love yourself really well, if you take to the idea that we're all in a dream, we're all in a creation of ourselves, right? A lucid dream. This is all just us. If you're okay with that, then you're more than likely the part of source creation that's okay with, well, everything being itself, or a reflection of itself. And so, negative beings, what does this have to do with them? Well, negative beings, all of them, as well as all evil beings, because there is a difference, they all come from the part of source creation that is in resistance to being the only thing in the universe, and that is the secret. If you come across a negative being in the astral plane, or even in life, because it works with people too, and you say to them, I know your secret. You're terrified of being alone. They'll run really fast. Really, really fast. They'll run before you even get to finish your sentence. Now, another thing that I'd like to mention here is that if you know the being's name, they automatically have to forfeit their right to withhold a secret. Okay? So they'll be forced to tell you everything about their existence, their makeup, their life. If you have, let's say, a demon, which means daemon, or an unnamed god, that's the actual definition of a demon. If you have one in front of you that's quite negative, and you know its name, and you're about to say it, it knows, even if you don't know why the name has power, knowing this thing's name, it knows that if you say its name, it has to tell you everything about its existence, as well as its bane of existence. And so it's going to be terrified. You might not know why. You might just be saying its name over and over and over again, noticing that it's working. But from its perspective, it's terrified of you speaking the truth. Or even worse, getting it to tell you its deepest, darkest fear. Now, when it comes to reaching a specific level of consciousness, in order to be privy to the same information that these ascended masters all know, you have to get there first. There are two ways to do it. One is more organic. It's one whereby which you look at a symbol, and when you rest your eyes upon the center of the symbol, you'll find that your awareness will raise, and you'll start to see things come into your room. They'll bleed in through the wall. These are beings. You can look at them as angels, and they will make you aware of this information if you ask, as well as some other truths about our universe. Now I'm reaching that part of the conversation that I can't tell everybody. The way that I found this out was by taking way too much San Pedro. Now, San Pedro is the male version of ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is often seen as a feminine force and a feminine energy. Okay, San Pedro is male in energy, and it tends to give you things in a specific way. It's more direct, it's more in your face, it's less healing, and more storytelling. Whilst on San Pedro, I was shown this image. I've drawn it out and shared it before, I believe, on a YouTube video. I cannot remember which video in particular, so I'm going to have to put that together again. Without that image, you cannot do this organically. You will not find this image anywhere else online, although you would think that you should be able to find it because it is so simple. But yeah, so these are the two ways that you can reach this same state of being, so that you can be privy to the same information. But whether you know about the origin of God or you don't, it doesn't entirely matter, because a lot of beings don't know that. But of course, if you call Jesus into the fold, or Buddha, or anyone else that has knowledge of the secret, then they're more than likely going to show up, and negative beings can't risk them not showing up. They will run, and they will not come back. I'm Ryan James Cropper. This has been your potential. Thank you for sticking around for being a subscriber for so long. I've seen the comments. A lot of you have said that you've been watching me for, wow, some of you since you were 13 and now you're in your 20s. It's awesome. It's also a reminder that time is definitely a thing. I would like to give a special thanks, if I haven't already, to those of you who have been sharing my content. It actually gives me a reason to keep posting. Because the more you share the content, the more people are able to see these videos. And there is nothing worse than feeling like you're speaking to an empty room. It's very discouraging. I've had some issues in the past with YouTube. When it comes to that side of YouTube, you know, there was a time when I was posting and nothing was happening. And I almost stepped back from YouTube. Because again, no one wants to be talking to an empty room. When you share the content, it brings people into the room. And it makes it feel as if I'm heard. That feeling of being heard, that's what makes, getting all emotional, that motivates me to get gear and to move heaven and earth to get out a video, even when it's really difficult. So thank you. Thank you for sticking around, and thank you for keeping me around. I wouldn't want to do anything else. I'm Ryan JC, Ryan James Cropper. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll speak to you all pretty soon. Take care. Peace.